First, want to hear what the former president told them about his vice president's refusal to overturn the election.
Had Mike Pence had the courage to send it back to the legislatures, you would have had a different outcome, in my opinion.
Is that what you told him to do, the vice president?
I didn't tell him to do anything.
What did you want him to do?
I thought that the election was rigged. I think that when you have more votes than you had voters, I think that the Vice President of the United States must protect the Constitution of the United States, right? And it says very, very clearly, protect the Constitution of the United States. I don't believe he's just supposed to be a statue who gets these votes from the states and immediately hands them over.
Back with Carol Lenig and Philip Rucker, authors of the new book, I Alone Can Fix It, Donald J. Trump's Catastrophic Final Year. It's a fascinating read. You know, he's talking about Mike Pence. In the last bite, the long bite we played, he talked about, you were asking him about what did he want the people who he told to go to the Capitol, that he was going to walk with them, what did he want them to do when he get there? And he stumbled around it. But he basically, the closest he got was saying, I wanted what they wanted. Well, what a lot of them wanted, according to what they were chanting, was to hang Mike Pence.
Yeah, and what President Trump wanted was for Vice President Mike Pence to overturn the result somehow. Not constitutional, but in Trump's mind, it was what he thought his loyal vice president should have done. And it's ironic that Trump said that Pence shouldn't have been just a statue there following the rules, because for 4 years, Pence was a statue. That's why Trump picked him to be vice president, because he would stand at his side, nod his head, smile approvingly, and not cause any trouble for Trump.
I find it hard to imagine that the former president restrained himself and never said to his vice president what he wanted him to do. I mean, he was saying like, "Oh no, I didn't tell him to do anything." Kind of.
He absolutely asked him.
Yeah.
He absolutely asked him multiple times.
I want to play another clip from your interview. You asked the former president where he talks about Pence. Let's watch.
Who will your vice president be if you run again?
This is him.
Really? It's a good question.
Well, I was disappointed in Mike, but, you know, I'll be making a decision at some point.
But not guaranteed
Now,
that
I will say this. Based on the polls, those polls are great. The Republican Party loves Trump. You saw that 97%.
But you're not locked in that you would run with Pence again.
No, I'm not locked into anything. I mean, I'm not locked in.
What if he were? I mean, he could run against you in a primary. He wants to run for president too.
It's a free country, right? It's a free country. I always liked Mike. I was very disappointed, and so were a lot of Republicans very disappointed, because had he sent them back, had he been Thomas Jefferson, had he sent them back, which took courage, but not a lot of courage. What courage would have been is to do what Thomas Jefferson did. We're taking the votes. We could have done that too. But that would have been politically unacceptable. But sending it back to these legislatures who now know that bad things happened would have been very acceptable. And I think I could show you letters from legislatures, big scale letters from different states, the states we're talking about. Had he done that, I think it would have been a great thing for our country. I think it would have been a great thing for our country, and that's the way it is.
I'm not sure what big scale letters are, but the idea that he is still spreading these lies and believing these lies and propagating these lies is, I mean, it's extraordinary, and really kind of not criminal, but just outrageous, given that this was actually a remarkable election, and Americans should be praised, Republicans and Democrats, for, in the midst of a deadly pandemic, coming out in overwhelming numbers at risk to themselves, and, you know, by a whole bunch of different ways that made it easier for them to vote, which is obviously something that Republicans are concerned about now. But this was actually a victorious election for Republicans and for America, because Americans turned out in a pandemic. And by the way, Republicans did great all across the country, except for Donald Trump.
You know, some of the president's advisors tried to tell Trump that, including Bill Barr, his attorney general. After the election, he said, Mr. President, these allegations you're making about a rigged election or fraudulent votes, we've looked into them. They're BS. They're nonsense. And he actually said to him, how is it that you think you lost in this state, but the entire Republican ticket did great? How can that be? You know, I'm really amazed, too, about how much Donald Trump's inner narrative has hardened since the election. Every conspiracy theory that Phil and I heard people whispering in his ear after the election, he was listening to sort of tangentially, maybe, maybe not. Immediately after the election, he said to Kellyanne Conway, how could we have lost? How could we lose? I'm so sorry we lost. But as time has gone by, his narrative has gotten more conspiratorial, more totally lacking in basis and fact. But he's spreading the word. And it's part of the reason he's
and also, I mean, who's going to, you know, contradict him at Mar-a-Lago? The beautician in the spa? I mean, there's not a lot of people around there of, you know, weight who are going to stand up and say, Mr. President, that's not reality.
That's right. And in fact, during our interview with President Trump, Laura Ingraham, the Fox News host, came by and interrupted because she's a guest at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, those are the kind of people that are hanging around the president and putting things in his ear.
He said something to you as you left. What was the exchange?
It was actually one of my favorite moments of the interview because, as I said, he was quite a gracious host, quite charming in his way. And he came over to check on us where we were seated for dinner on the patio. And Phil and I, you know, mentioned to him that we might have some follow-up questions. And he said, absolutely, please come back. I would love it. It was an honor to do this. And we both remarked, you know, you spent a lot of time with us, Mr. Trump. And that would, you know, we promise not to use that much time if we come back again. And he said, you know, it's a sickness, but I really enjoyed it.
A sickness.
It's a sickness, but I really enjoyed it. I find that fascinating. I mean, it shows almost like there's been some introspection, which I find hard to imagine, but maybe I'm reading too much into it. But it's a sickness, but I really enjoyed it. Thank you both. Really appreciate it.
Thank you,
The
Anderson.
book is fascinating.